We just did a brief little introduction last week on evolution, and we're going to go more into evolution, and we're going to have to revisit these topics several times as we go through the material, because there's a lot of intervening information that you really need to understand the future material. So we're going to revisit densities and things like that periodically as we go through the stuff.
Dean, you want to reintroduce yourself just for the YouTube?
Sure. My name is Dean Graves. I'm one of the co-founders of Prima Healing Meditation. The source of this information is primarily from my higher self. A lot of it I got out of a series of channelings that were done by L&L Research out of Louisville, Kentucky. And the channelings were done back in the early 80s from an entity by the name of Ra, who is also my higher self. And so that information I didn't get directly from my higher self, but all the subsequent information is from my higher self, which is the same source that channeled the original material. Okay, and we'll get into who Ra is and why he's talking to us and all of this stuff somewhat tonight, and more so in the coming weeks. And tonight we're going to cover, or begin to cover, evolution. And evolution is how the Creator experiences itself. It's not really that difficult to process, but being in the swamp, I like to say, it's tough to see enough around us to get a handle or get an understanding of it. But evolution begins, again picking up where we left off last week, evolution is the creation of the perceived separated portion of the Creator. It is how the consciousness side of free will picture implemented the plan to experience itself, the Creator to experience itself. So evolution begins with, as we referred to last week, 8 density, and proceeds from there. And there are numerous elements that were created as part of evolution in order to facilitate a variety of experiences. And we begin with the first distortion of the law of one, which is free will. The second distortion is love, which is also the creative principle. Now from here, we begin a process of facilitating a move that perceptibly is away from the Creator. In OIC, we use as the notation for the one infinite Creator. And evolution appears to be moving away from the Creator. There's actually no movement whatsoever. This is simply a thought process. So there's nothing lost by moving away from the Creator. The moving away from the Creator is actually the perception of lowering consciousness. And consciousness, if you recall, is intelligent infinity that perceives itself to be separate from the Creator. So when we say that you're moving away from the Creator, there's actually no movement, there's actually no diminishment of the Creator other than the perception and the amount of consciousness that is included. The first thing that the 8th density created was an octave. And an octave, if you will recall, is the division of 8 levels of consciousness. And we tried to do this last week. And miscounted. How'd I do? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Darn. Gotten better at it. Okay, after the 8th density created the octave, decided if 1 was good, an infinite number would be better. So created the concept of manyness. So there is an infinity of octaves, and we would perceive them to be created in sequential form. So the initial octaves were believed to be less complicated than the later octaves. But we don't have time yet, so that's just our perception. All of this actually happens simultaneously. There is no before and after. It is all, again, a thought process. So the initial octaves were more simplistic than the later octaves. They learned from the initial octave creation to incorporate what worked, eliminate what didn't work in the early octaves, and continue on. Creation begins at a center point. There is, relatively speaking, the perception of a center point or a central sun. Our galaxy has a central sun and has expanded outward from that initial point. Our universe, which is one of many universes of its type that are included in the octave, also begins at a center point, and it's presumed, because Ra does not know for sure, but it's presumed that the creation of octaves begins at a center point and expands outward. Okay? We have the densities. One of the next vital things that is expanded upon is polarity. And if you remember last week, we talked about the first polarity being free will, the distortion of intelligent infinity. That the separated portion of the Creator perceived itself to be separate from the Creator itself, and so that was actually the first polarity. And that's expanded upon significantly also. Now, still dealing with the octave level in the densities, there were created archetypes of the densities. In our particular octave, there are 9 archetypes. These archetypes, to bring it closer to home to something that might be familiar to you, if you've heard of the Council of 9 or the Cirrus High Council, it's the same thing. These are the 9 aspects of our octave reflected on a lower level in our little geographic area of creation. And these are reflected actually in 6th density. They're not reflected in 7th or 8th density. The 6th density is the beginning of the reflection of the archetypes of our experience. In other octaves, the number of archetypes ranges from 1 to 32. Our particular octave happens to have 9 archetypes and polarity. Okay? Other octaves have 32. Other octaves have 32 archetypes and polarity. But all of the universes, all the logos in our octave have these same 9 archetypes. Okay? Any questions? I see some puzzled looks.
Are you going to name the archetypes?
I'm going to put them up here right now, as a matter of fact.
Before you go any further, there are 9 that are in everything, but others have more.
Some have more, some have less. And there's an infinite number of architects probably are, archetypes that are mixed and matched in different ways in order to create different experiences in different octaves.
So these 9 are not common to all,
They're common to our octave.
okay.
Okay? And what the others are, I can't tell you. It's,
What exactly is our octave? Just like our universe, or?
it's beyond our, there's an infinite number of universes in our octave. And there's an infinite number of octaves.
Okay.
Okay? In our octave, there is Ra. We'll start with Ra. Ra is an archetype for our octave. It is the archetype of love. And all of these archetypes are inherent characteristics of the Creator. In other words, they were not created to form this archetype. They were extracted from the Creator and highlighted. So they were already there. They just decided to pick these 9 for this experience. Okay? The archetype of Ra is green ray energy. It corresponds to the 4th chakra, which we'll get into chakras much later. It is the musical harmonic note of F, which is important because it is the sound that harmonizes all of creation. Light does not harmonize. All of the physical matter that we experience is light that is harmonized into shape and form by sound. Light is retained within our experience, within our octave. Sound is not. Sound transcends all barriers of octaves. Okay? And this, of course, is the emotion of love as well. Okay, we good? The next archetype is law, L-A. Law is the archetype of wisdom. It corresponds to the 5th density in 5th chakra. Ra corresponds to the 4th density in 4th chakra. Ra is a 6th density entity, but the characteristics correspond to 4th density. Law corresponds to the 5th density. It is blue ray energy. It is the musical note of B. And it is an emotion, considered an emotion of wisdom as well. Next on the list is Yah. Yah is the archetype of unity. Corresponds to the 6th density and the 6th chakra. It is indigo in color. And it is the musical note of C1.
What is C1?
Well, you begin with C0 is the bass tuning instrument, and you go up, it repeats every 8
Right.
notes. So this is the 2nd C.
Okay.
It is the emotion of joy. Can you see through me? Okay.
It's up there. I didn't read him right, so I know you see, so, yeah, it's not
Right, yeah. Okay? Everybody good?
Mm-hmm.
The next archetype is Da, D-A. It is the aspect of movement. It corresponds to the third density and third chakra. It is the musical note of C0. And it is the emotion of fear.
And what color is that?
Yellow.
Yeah.
Everybody good just taking notes?
What was the emotion of law again?
Fear.
Of law.
Oh, law?
Or die, still on die.
Well,
Law
law
was
was wisdom.
Right. So there's,
That's the emotion.
that's the emotion
Yeah,
too.
that's the
Okay, I just wanted to make
emotion,
sure.
too.
Thank you.
Did you mention a emotion of, for die, or you just said?
Yeah,
movement?
fear.
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 Your favorite.
Mhm.
The next archetype is Ka, K-A. It is the aspect of non-movement. It corresponds to the 8th density and 8th chakra. And if you consider, and we'll talk more about this in a few minutes, that the creator is absolute stability and absolutely non-movement, absolute stillness. So is the 8th chakra and 8th density. When we meditate, we seek stillness, and in the stillness we find our higher self and the creator. And that's the importance of stillness. Actually, movement is what facilitates our perceived movement away from the creator. The more active that we are in our evolutionary process, the farther away from the creator we are. So as we move up the scale in our evolutionary process of returning to the creator, we seek stillness. And a lot of people are under the misunderstanding that as we progress, we are moving faster, things are moving faster, which is not the case. We're slowing down. Everything else is staying the same speed. And so consequently, the perception is that things are getting faster. Okay?
So it's okay that I'm slower once I get older.
Absolutely.
So, color, emotion,
Violet,
what?
violet ray energy, corresponds to the crown chakra. Musical note of D, the emotion of peace. Everybody good? Okay, the next archetype of our octave is Lucifer. It is the characteristic of unconsciousness. And this is not to be confused with consciousness as the separated part of the creator. This is, we have a limited number of words that describe the situation. This is unawareness consciousness. It corresponds to the first density and to the first chakra. It is red ray energy. It is the musical note of E and the emotion of despair. Which is very low vibration energy, despair. The next archetype of our octave is Ta, T-A. It is the aspect of separation. Corresponds to the second density in the second chakra. It is orange ray energy. The musical note G. And it is the emotion of guilt and shame. We good? Next archetype is Sa, S-A. Sa is the aspect of awakeness or awareness. It corresponds to the lower half of the sixth density and sixth chakra. If you recall last week we talked about the indigo chakra in sixth density actually being the largest density from the standpoint of range of consciousness. And Sa is the lower half of that chakra in that density.
So is Ya the upper half or all of it?
Now Ya is the upper half.
Okay.
This is gold ray energy. It is the musical note of A. It is the emotion of responsibility. Glad we have note takers. There will not be a quiz next week.
Thank you.
Okay, we good? Last but not least is the archetype Melchizedek. It is the aspect of free will.
I don't know, say that word again.
Melchizedek?
Is there a D in there somewhere?
Huh?
Your spelling
Is there a
seems
D
off
there
from what you're
somewhere?
saying.
Yeah.
That's a long one anyway.
Okay, and that's what Melchizedek is. And there's a lot of stuff out there about Melchizedek sources, and all of that is not tied to this Melchizedek.
Nor Drumolo.
Huh?
Nor to Drumolo.
Melchizedek is a popular name, which we're getting ahead of ourselves, but it's a popular name in concept used by the service to self aspects of our experience. But Melchizedek, the archetype, is a sixth density aspect of the Creator. Not to be confused with what's popularly promoted.
If it's sixth density, then is it,
Huh?
if it's sixth density, does it contain all of sixth density, or how does that work with
Well, these are
God and solid?
the aspects. It does not contain all of these that we've been going over.
Mhm.
Comprise essentially divisions of sixth density. Okay, sixth density is representative of each of these archetypes. In other words, all of sixth density in our octave is divided into what's called social memory complexes. Each social memory complex is an archetype. So raw, the aspect of raw, and again, this is what I was trying to explain before. It's difficult to explain the whole concept of it without doing it in increments so that you can get intervening information. But the sixth density aspect of raw, it's difficult for us to perceive how an entity can have an individual personality and communication and still be a total social memory complex that's pervasive to the entire octave. But it is. So an entity, the entity that I talk to is not only an individual personality, but it is also part of the social memory complex. So when you speak to that aspect, it has a personality, but it also has the voice of the entire social memory complex.
So these other archetypes are still part of sixth density, but they also are not
Social
separated.
memory
But
complexes.
they're part of, like, they're associated with fifth density or fourth density or what have you,
Well,
from the notes you just gave us?
yeah, we're going to get there. Sixth density, well, let me finish this and then we'll
Okay.
get to that, okay? Melchizedek is the aspect of free will. It is associated with actually the ninth chakra, which is the white chakra that is outside of our body. It's about an inch and a half or 2 inches above the crown chakra. It is white in color. It is the musical note of F sharp. And from one of my musical friends, it was interesting that they identified immediately in explaining this to them that F sharp is one of, if not the only note, that when combined with another note will resonate to that other note. In other words, it can go higher or lower in order to create a harmonic sound, a harmonic experience. And this is the aspect of free will. So that's not by accident. The emotion of Melchizedek is bliss.
This whiteness around the body is different from the aura? Or,
Yes, it's
Okay.
different from the aura. The aura is a whole nother energy system of our body.
okay,
It is interlinked and closely tied with the chakra system, but it is a separate system. Okay? Everybody got that? Got all their notes? Yes.
Did I miss 7? Was there a, seventh density
correlation?
correlation? Yeah.
Aspect of separation.
No, that was density of the second.
Yeah, I'm sure. Let me look real quickly.
I don't think you listed all the correlations, so, because I didn't hear some of them either.
Well, Ra was the 4th density, 4th chakra. La was 5th in 5th chakra. Ya was 6th in 6th chakra.
Is third density.
Das is 3rd.
Third.
Ka is 8th. Lucifer was 1st. Ta was 2nd. No, I left that one off. They don't get one right now. I didn't put that in my notes, but I'll get that to you. Okay, any question about these? Now, how these work, and we'll get into more of this in coming weeks. All of this is represented by 6th density. This is how 6th density advances itself. 6th density will harmonize, each aspect of 6th density must balance with each of the other aspects. So for example, Ra has to balance itself with the other 8 aspects. And once they are balanced, then they are able to move to 7th density. That's how they progress through the evolutionary path. They have to do it in 3rd density. They have to incarnate as a 3rd density being. In other words, they have to be as stupid as we are and be able to balance with the other aspects, with the other archetypes. Ra has done this. Ra is now 7th density. Okay? Any questions? There's some puzzled looks. I don't hate to leave puzzled looks.
Get used to it.
Okay.
It's like physics class.
Well, we can get into more of that too.
Do they have sounds like do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do? Do they have
That's what the.
That's what the musical notes are.
Probably a little bit
But
more.
they
That's
have
what
to-
these are.
That's what the F and G, I see, yeah.
These are the
Musical.
This is musical scale.
Well, I didn't hear you perform that, so I wasn't sure.
I was waiting for you. Okay, at this level of creation, the other regulating factor for all octaves is the speed of light, which is a variable and a significant variable from octave to octave. The speed of light is not the same in our octave as it is in other octaves. And it is just a constant. It is not a limitation other than in our level of consciousness.
Say that last sentence again.
It is a
So
constant.
it's really not moving. It's really not a matter really of speed, it's a constant.
It's a
But
constant.
But we perceive it as a
Yes.
speed or a length.
It is a constant. It is just a measure. It's just like a measuring stick. That everything, it is the benchmark for what everything else is created off of. And in other octaves, Some is faster, some is slower. Again, the purpose of creation is to create diversity so that the creator might know all possible aspects of itself or elements of itself. And so there's no reason to duplicate anything. And it's exactly like running an experiment. If we try this at 186,000, miles per second, then we don't need to do that again. We'll do another ingredient.
All of the masters talk about, or most of the things that you read, you talk about when they're trying to be descriptive of God, they talk about omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient. But what we're getting here is that he's not omniscient. There's no such thing as omniscience, because he's still in the process of learning, so he can't be all-knowing.
It's an infinite process, but it's all simultaneous as well.
And I think it's comparatively speaking. I mean, I would think that the Creator is omniscient compared to what? It's going to know what it knows.
But that's the main point, is the fact that it's all ongoing and it's all at once as well.
Yeah, which is a paradox, which is very difficult for us to grasp.
But doesn't he know? He just hasn't experienced it.
Well, the way that the Creator knows is the same way that we know. You experience it. That's the whole purpose of creation. It's one thing to know it, intellectually know it,
Right.
and it's another thing to experience it, and then you really know it.
To understand it.
So the whole evolutionary process is the experiencing part. Okay? Does that answer your question, or is it?
That's fine. That's not my question. I'm still stuck on the sixth density.
Okay. Okay, other elements of the evolutionary process, and which we touched on last week, are DNA, which we call DNA. It's actually just called coding, but it corresponds to DNA, and that's why I'm calling it DNA. We see it in physical form and call it DNA. What it is an allocation of capacity to hold consciousness. And it is consciousness that we're segregating into these layers. And the first density has 8 strands of DNA potentiated. Now, when we start first density, and that's where we all start, is first density. When we start first density, we only have 2 strands of DNA activated. And through experience of first density, we learn. And as we learn, we gather additional DNA, up to 8. Okay? And how we learn in first density is we essentially learn physicality. The interaction of atmosphere with earth, the interaction of water with earth, with atmosphere, and fire. The interaction of the 4 basic elements provides learning opportunities very slowly, and it is not given a time frame, it's an endless time frame. But it is through that interaction of contact, really in physical form, that learning is done to facilitate evolution in first density. And once we amass enough consciousness and gain enough DNA, then we move on to second density. Now, an important point that I'll make, and when we get a little farther down the line, I'll explain why, but there is not a graduation per se from first density to second density. When you've amassed enough consciousness and have enough DNA, then you move on into second density. There's not a big, cap and gown ceremony and celebration and all that kind of stuff. You just move on. In second density, we have up to 16 DNA. And again, we start with 2. And DNA is allocated in increments of 2. So we'll have 16 DNA in second density. Second density is higher plant and animal life. Human toddlers are in second density, or not in, they're in third density, they have second density consciousness. If you're in, for example, second density, you can have third density consciousness, but be limited because of DNA to be a second density participant. And that's true of all of the levels, which will become a little bit more clear in just a second when we get to third here, which is where we are. And we began with 18 DNA. And we were stuck at 20 strands of DNA for a long time.
We begin at 18?
Hmm?
You said we begin at 18?
We began at 18, yeah. And right now we have 22, most people have 22 strands of DNA activated. And that is because we were stuck at 20 for a long time, and to rush things along, they gave us 2 more, which moved us up to 22. So the third density population of Earth has 22 strands of DNA. On December 21st, we will get 2 more strands of DNA. Now, just because you get the DNA doesn't mean that you get the consciousness. You still got to, particularly at our level of consciousness, since we have the capacity to do work and are self-aware, we have the capacity to do the work to put the consciousness into the DNA capacity. But we're no longer restricted like we were. Okay? And fourth density, up to 32 strands of DNA. The human body is not designed to handle more than 32 strands of DNA. It will start to die. There's too much energy. So you don't have many beings incarnating in our level of consciousness with more than 32 strands of DNA. You do have some, not many. And most of those we identify as our great spiritual leaders and saints and people like that. And that's a whole nother subject we'll get to in coming weeks, subsequent sessions. Okay, and then we move up. So let me check my math on this. The fifth density, 40 strands, 48. Actually, we have 48 in sixth density for the lower half and 56 strands for the upper half of sixth density. And then seventh density gets us up to 64. In an eighth density, you don't need strands anymore, because you have no body. Seventh density, you really don't have a body. You're pure light and you're everywhere. Eighth density doesn't need any of that stuff. It is pure consciousness. This is how they put people, put beings, put spirits into the different densities and allow them to have a unique experience according to that level of consciousness. Now there is an infinite range, and this is a range. There is an infinite number of possibilities of experience within each range. Because of the concept of manyness and because of the infinite, I keep using that word, it's the only thing to describe it, infinite range of experiences available to each individual.
And harvest only takes place between third and fourth.
Yeah, that's true. And the transition from this level to this level, from third density to fourth density, is the only level that requires a harvest, a graduation. You get cap and gown and gold stars on your report card and all that kind of stuff. But this is the only level that that happens. All the other levels, when you're ready, you go. Okay? And the reason for that, okay. The primary purpose of third density, of our level of consciousness, is very simple. All that we are supposed to do is make a choice. This is the density of choice. And the choice is the choice between service to self or service to others.
So that capping, you threw me on the capping and everything. Is that gonna be like an aha moment that we realize, or?
Now you won't graduate until after you die.
Okay.
You have to lose physical body to go from third density to fourth density.
Okay, thank
But there's no Armageddon event planned or anything like that.
No fun in that.
You gotta wait.
you. I was like,
Well,
scared of it.
You don't wake up with a hangover the next day.
Was that something you covered last week?
What, the graduation? No, we haven't gotten to it yet.
Okay.
Yeah, we're still, but that is the purpose of this level of consciousness.
But that part is what you're talking here, that is on our self or the others of choice.
Well, it's in every third density experience,
Right,
yes.
okay.
What we're supposed to be doing here while we are incarnate, and this must be done while we're incarnate. When you're not incarnate anymore, then you're out of the game. You've been sent to the lockers, and you can come back next week and try again, but you're not in the game anymore. Okay? And there's no preference one or the other. It is purely a choice. If your choice is to be service to self, that's fine. But you still got to graduate. You got to qualify in order to get there. The same is true with service to others. You've got to meet the criteria in order to go to fourth density. Now, the interesting thing about third density, in order to facilitate this, all the polarity, all service to self, all service to others are all mixed together. This is the most, the active level of consciousness of all the levels of consciousness. It is most intense, it is the most difficult to experience. But all you got to do to get to fourth density is you got to raise your consciousness enough to make a choice. And you do have to make you do have enough of a consciousness in order to make a choice. Now, we ended the third density experience on December 26, 2011. The third density experience is the only, it is the shortest experience. It is the most defined experience. It lasts 76,825.6 years. That's how long this experience has been going on Earth. Okay? And it's divided into 3 segments. And you can graduate at one of 3 segments. At the end of the first segment, nobody graduated on Earth. At the end of the second segment, 150 people graduated. And we are anticipating the probability is right now that we will have a 28% graduation. 12% will be service to self and 16% will be service to others. So 72% of the population of Earth, that is in third density, and there's a lot of beings here that are not in the process of third density, which again we'll get to in future weeks, is looking to do third density again. No big deal. You just, you go to the locker room, you clean up, come back next week, and you try again.
And how does one make the choice? How do you recognize whether...
In thought and deed.
Thought indeed.
In
And the
thought
person
deed.
would be aware, oh, okay, I'm about me. or I'm about others?
Yeah, very, very obviously aware. I mean, some that I know of in history, Genghis Khan was polarized service to self. Rasputin was polarized service to self. I mean, you know, those are clearly people that were polarized service to self.
The bigger problem is the ones who haven't made a decision because they don't. They're not aware enough.
It's like Mother Teresa was service to others.
Okay? So that is the objective, and this is very important level of consciousness because it affects all the other levels of consciousness significantly. Okay? And I'm going to suggest that we halt here because the next item is dimensions and time, and it's going to take a while to go through dimensions and time.
So are you open for questions?
Absolutely.
I want to go all the way back to the first creation on the first night that you talked about the Creator created infinity.
I wasn't there.
You were.
Well, I was, but I
You were the one
I
that
wasn't paying attention.
You were the one that verbalized it. I've always thought of infinity as being an aspect of God, a part of, not something that He would create.
First thing He created exists outside of infinity.
How does one exist outside of infinity?
When we get to dimensions, I'll try and explain that because it has to do with dimensions. Our perception has to do with the limitations in our ability.
So this is a matter of perception, not of reality.
Everything's simultaneous. Everything is a thought. There's absolutely nothing real that we perceive to be real. It's all just, okay, I did creation. Which is really tough for us to conceive of.
Yeah, because you think of infinity as being eternal, without beginning as well as without end. And being,
Well, think
and
about
being,
that.
and
There's
being
no
a part.
beginning and there's no end.
Yeah,
When did it happen? It's real tough for us to perceive that.
yeah. So why would we even say that He created infinity when He is infinity? Or God, the Creator is infinity. Why would you say?
How
the
would you
Creator-
try to explain it?
I wouldn't. I'd just say that's just part of Him. That's part
Well,
of that.
I prefaced my beginning last week that it begins and ends in mystery.
Ah, that covers it.
And Ryan even says that in.
Well, that's just like saying I don't know.
Exactly.
What are we doing
Well,
here?
anything that takes place on the free will side of the equation, which we are all on, is going to have something that's going to be imperceivable because we're in the box.
I know I haven't.
So, yeah, there are things that we have. There's going to be more stuff that we don't understand here too. But we just get into dimensions. And
I
we're
love
not
a good
gonna-
mystery.
Is it imperceivable even once you reach 8th density?
No.
When does it start getting clearer than which density is you start perceiving things?
Well, the great thing
It'll get significantly more clear in fourth
the
density.
great thing is that sooner or later you'll know everything.
Or nothing.
Or nothing.
Thanks for clearing that up, Dean.
Clear as mud.
Clear as mud.
Okay, anybody have any questions?
So we're ready to go home.
Right for pride.
Get this on YouTube fast, because I'm going to have to watch it a few more times.
Okay.
It was very interesting. Thank you, Dean.
Yes, it was.